This does break international law in a very specific and limited way.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining the No Deal virtual rally. Please welcome to your screens your host for the event, Hanya Schulich.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Hanya. I'm a local activist from Leicestershire, and I'll be your host for tonight's No Deal virtual rally. Exactly a year ago, the team behind this event were in the final preparations for a march which saw over 1 million people take to the streets of London calling for a people's vote. Who would have predicted that just a few months later we would be in lockdown due to a global pandemic? This pandemic has resulted in a huge shift in the way that we as activists have had to campaign and the way that British politics works, or in some cases, doesn't work. It's meant that we've had to take our advocacy online, but we won't stop fighting for our values. At the previous rally in June, we told you that it was becoming apparent that a no-deal option was becoming the preferred option for many of the decision makers in government. Recent events have now shown that this is indeed the case. Last year, Boris Johnson went to the country with a simple offer. He told everybody that he had negotiated a brilliant withdrawal agreement with the EU, that it was ready to go, or to use his word, that it was oven ready. He asked the country to vote for him on the promise that he would get Brexit done, and the country believed him. But since then, Boris Johnson has threatened to tear up the so-called oven-ready agreement that he negotiated, the same one that got him elected, via his internal market bill. This is a clear breach of international law and has resulted in the EU sending notification of legal proceedings to Downing Street. Brexit is far from done, and a no-deal Brexit is still firmly on the table thanks to the internal market bill, causing a breakdown in negotiations. A no-deal Brexit would put additional strain on the NHS at a time that it needs our support the most. There is no democratic mandate for a no-deal Brexit. And so for the second time this year, we've come together at a virtual rally calling on the government to take no deal off the table for good. We're in the middle of a health crisis, unlike any that we've seen in our lifetime. And the government should be concentrating on preparing our health service for the next wave of COVID-19 and not on steering the country towards a low standard, high barrier vision of the future that is seemingly designed to address internal party politics. This must not stand, and it will not stand. The government is choosing to do this, and we can choose to stop them. We're here to tell Boris Johnson and his allies in Downing Street that we say no to no deal. And we're joined today by some fantastic speakers from across the political spectrum and beyond. So now I'd like to introduce our first speaker. And I'm just going to check who it is. Okay, great. So will you please join me in welcoming Vaughan Gething, Minister for Health and Social Services at the Welsh Government. Vaughan, over to you.
Well, thank you, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. You're right that we are living through an extraordinary time, a public health crisis that has challenged us like no other. It is a genuine once-in-a-century event. And yet through this, we have had to struggle, individual nations, all 4 nations across Europe and the wider world. And it should give us a greater respect for the truth and for facts. Our ability to learn from what has happened in the last few months and the challenges we have had to confront should absolutely be at the forefront of our minds over the challenges of the next few months and years. I go back to the challenges we have had over personal protective equipment in particular. We recognised very quickly at the start of this pandemic that our ability to get in equipment to protect our frontline health and care staff and the people that they were caring for was severely compromised by international procurement chains and the ability we faced the difficulty we faced in getting those goods in to all the countries of the UK. And yet a no deal is likely to provide even more challenges in the field of health and care, as we're going through an extraordinarily challenging autumn and winter, one like no other, where a moderate flu season, allied to a continued resurgence of the coronavirus pandemic, is likely to provide a challenge like no other. And I can tell you, as a health minister who's been a health minister through 6 previous winters, this is the most difficult we have ever seen. No deal is not just unavoidable, it is not inevitable, it is a choice. The United Kingdom government could choose to take no deal away and the additional threat that would provide. The risk not just to medicine supply, not just to goods and services, not just the friction in our trading relationship, but in the relations we will continue to rely upon in years to come. In the fields of research, the continuity we need to combat the current threat to coronavirus that is not finished, the challenges of creating new and different treatments, the damage that would be done in terms of our inability to work in the most efficient way with other partners who are all looking to create new potential treatments and therapies in the field of health and care. And now with the urgency that coronavirus provides, to intervene and interrupt that flow of information and knowledge is not something that I think any responsible government of any party should sign up to. But my real concern, as ever, is for people. The lives that have been lost over the last few months, the difficult choices we have faced, and yet we've had to make choices based on imperfect evidence, a developing knowledge base. And yet we do have evidence about the impact that a no deal would have. We do have evidence about the impact it would have in the fields of health and care. But I can tell you, as a health minister, I am more concerned for the longer term impact on our economy. I know very well that every time there is a significant level of unemployment, there is additional demand that comes into our health and care system. Physical and crucially mental health and well-being need goes up. There is more demand on our service, and crucially, there's less public income coming in to deliver the public services that we value. I don't think that that is a bright future for this country, and I don't think that's what people were offered. And I certainly don't think there is a white charger waiting on the hill to deliver a new world-leading trade deal with the rest of the world to make up for what we could well lose with a no deal. I think there are many voices who will say that they want a country that is based on principles they recognise, that is based on evidence, that is based on decency. Crucially, now more than ever, is based on fact. You can't eat fiction and you can't keep people well on a dream. I look forward to all of us playing our part to gain the very best for every part of our United Kingdom in whatever our European future is. And I hope more than anything else that is not a future based on the damage that a no deal Brexit will do.
Thank you, Vaughan, for reminding us of the health and economic implications of government action and government choices at this time. And thank you also to the Welsh Government for being part of our No to No Deal rallies. We always start these events with a speaker from one of the devolved nations. This is because too often the needs of Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland are overlooked by policymakers in Westminster, despite the disproportionate effect that a no-deal Brexit would have on them. To hear more, we will welcome speakers from the Northern Irish Executive and the Scottish Government later in the event. Before we move to our next speaker, I wanted to let you know that despite this being a virtual rally, you can still be directly involved. At the start of the live stream, you saw some short videos of activists telling you why we support a No Deal campaign. If you're watching live rather than via a replay, simply WhatsApp a similar video to 07956 043 945. And we will try to feature some of our favourite videos later in the event. Now on to our next speaker, Polly Toynbee. Polly is known to many of you as a Guardian columnist and former BBC editor. Her columns regularly talk about the damaging effects of Brexit. And indeed, you may have read her recent column last week, which discussed how the Prime Minister may try to sneak through a bad deal just to say that he can claim, or just to claim that he did achieve the deal that he promised in the 2019 election campaign. We're delighted to welcome Polly to this event this evening, and we look forward to hearing her insights. So welcome, Polly. And just like us, you've been watching the negotiations closely, and you've written for The Guardian about how Boris Johnson's tactics have set the country on a path for no deal. You've also said that we should beware of any bare bones last minute deal that Johnson tries to paint as a success. So what do you think Boris Johnson's real agenda is?
I think by now, quite rightly, far too late in the day, they've actually taken fright. I think they have looked over the abyss, they've looked into the precipice, they've seen quite how terrifying the prospect of no deal is. So I think they would much prefer to have one. Of course, they keep saying, because they had this lunatic idea of it's good to be a tough negotiator. Of course, we'll walk away. We can walk away anytime we want to. But I think they now know that walking away would be far more catastrophic for us than for the other 27 countries. Today, the news is that Michael Gove is saying he thinks there's now a 66% chance that we will get a deal. So it's inching a bit closer. It sounds as if some of the friction is easing away. It sounds as if a more sensible approach has been taken by the British negotiators on the fraught question of state aid. It's a very odd idea that it should be Tories who are digging their heels in for the right to pick winners and have state aid when they haven't even used the amount they could use. They could have used 3 times more within the existing rules of the EU. So it's not a very convincing argument. They've still got fish to sort out. But it does look as if they would like to, if they can. Certainly Europe wants to deal. Who wouldn't? But nevertheless, what we have to be careful of is that all that's available now, due to their utter mishandling of the whole thing, due to their aggression, due to their Euroscepticism, will be a very bare bones rotten deal. It won't be a good deal. And of course, Boris Johnson will talk it up, and so will Michael Gove, and they will celebrate, and they'll set off fireworks and flags saying, we've got this fantastic deal, we've got them over a barrel. And it won't be true at all. The fact remains today, The Guardian is just reporting this evening, that there are now 10 massive lorry parks that have been acquired, not just in Kent, we know about some of them, but in Warrington, in Birmingham, in Epping Forest. They're expecting maybe some 7,000 lorries a day to be backed up. They need papers, people who have never exported before outside of Europe, not used to having to deal with export restrictions and paperwork, have been given a booklet. You couldn't call it a booklet, you'd call it a telephone book, 138 pages long, of everything that they have to do in order to just do basic trading with Europe and with the rest of Europe. And even if we get a bad deal, that's what they will have to do. And of course, a lot of them won't get it right at first. They'll make mistakes. There will be big backups and terrible problems. But probably after a few months, that will get sorted out. People will learn how to do it. It'll be troublesome. The HMRC says it's going to cost £15 billion, even if we do get the deal. It means 5 times more certifications for exporting, exporting animal products. And there is already an acute shortage of vets who have to produce those certificates, any dairy products, any animal-based products. So that even a deal is going to be really hard. But it is incredibly important that that door is kept open. Although in terms of expense, of waste of time, effort, of all the things that we know we're going to lose by having Brexit in, keeping that door ajar, which is what tonight's campaign is about, is vitally important for a whole lot of reasons. most of all, I think it's the fact that Brexit will turn out to be a process, an ongoing long process to and from negotiating different things. If the door is slammed shut, the process ends. If it's kept open, even with a very bad deal, the chances are that over the years, particularly as we get, as we hope, a better, more sane and rational government before too long, then all these deals can be reopened, can be renegotiated, different things can be done. We can move closer and have easier working relationships. If the door slams shut, I'm particularly worried that it will leak over into everything else. Our relations on climate change, our relations on NATO, on dealing with the rest of the world will be, far worse, and will lead to much worse trouble ahead. So it does matter crucially that we get a deal, even if the actual terms of it will still make still make the deal that they negotiate a pretty bad one.
Thank you, Polly. And what do you think if the government do manage to cobble together this bare bones deal and try to sell it to the country as some kind of success? What should we be doing as activists to expose the realities of that deal and the consequences?
Well, I think that you'll find even the right-wing press will be pointing their cameras at these lorry parks. There will be distraught manufacturers and exporters, desperate hauliers who've had their business seriously disrupted, who will be losing money hand over fist. There will be food rotting in lorries on this side and the other side of the channel. There will be disasters aplenty to embarrass the government. We just have to keep pointing the finger at that, saying, all of this was unnecessary. And as you said before, we were promised something very different. We were promised an oven-ready deal that would be smooth and easy and simple, the easiest deal on earth, they said. And this is the chaos we got instead. And we always knew that Brexit could never be easy, even with a more competent and a well-intentioned government. It would be very difficult to negotiate something that could resemble the good deal we have now. Nevertheless, there are huge numbers of different stages between absolute Brexit, door slammed shut, and something much closer to the relationship that we had when we were still inside the EU. So I think there'll be plenty for us campaigners to do. And I think we'll find the job not too difficult because it'll be just self-evident. I think a lot of things won't be available in supermarkets for quite a few months, things people are used to buying, particularly in the wintertime. Fresh fruit, vegetables, salads from Spain, from Southern Europe, won't be coming through on time. We're not going to starve. There'll be plenty of food. There's not going to be a panic, but there will definitely be, so the food manufacturers say, a shortage of lots of the things we're used to having.
Thank you, Polly, for your insights and your advice on that. So Brexit is not done, and it is by keeping pressure on the government and all of the opposition parties that we can limit the damage caused by leaving the EU, and in particular to prevent a no deal Brexit. So I would like to take this opportunity now to say thank you to the thousands of people who took part in our lobbying campaign today. Almost 4,000 people registered to take part. And the reports that we have received so far indicate lots of positive responses from MPs across the UK.
I'm supporting the No Deal campaign to protect British farming, animal welfare and the environment.
Okay, next up is the first of tonight's speakers from Scotland. The Scottish Government is in complete agreement with what the European movement and what many of our speakers tonight have been saying, that the UK government must not be allowed to get away with no deal or be able to present a bad deal as a triumph. And so we're pleased to receive their support in this event. Will you please welcome Jenny Gilruth, MSP, Minister for Europe and International Development at the Scottish Government.
We've always acknowledged that a majority in the UK, unlike in Scotland of course, did vote for Brexit, and we spent a long time seeking consensus and compromise which would respect those different views whilst limiting the damage Brexit is inevitably going to cause. For example, in our papers in the series Scotland's Place in Europe, which was of course published back at the end of 2016. We also pressed hard this summer for the transition period to be extended as provided for in the withdrawal agreement. And going ahead with Brexit at the end of this year, whilst the economy is reeling from COVID, is simply reckless in our view. But unfortunately, that request fell on deaf ears. And it's not just the Scottish Government, of course, who was pushing for that extension period. It was also in tandem with the Welsh Government. Even if a deal is now achieved, Scotland and the United Kingdom will be a lot worse off. The UK Government's ambition for the new relationship with the EU is so limited that even if an agreement can be struck, the damage to Scotland in many aspects of the relationship will be comparable to a no deal. We will only experience the full negative impact from the 1st of January onwards. Even if a no deal tariff is secured, our trade will face many new non-tariff barriers, such as the new requirements for documentation and for checks. Businesses have repeatedly warned of this. For the services sector, we're in the dark on the detail of any deal, but it's clear it'll be much worse than being a member state. We will have lost free movement of people. In terms of security and justice, tools such as the European arrest warrant may be completely lost. So might access to databases such as the Schengen Information System. Extradition will be substantially more difficult. These are serious risks for Scottish law enforcement. And Scottish Government modelling of a basic trade deal agreement on the type that the UK Government is wanting finds that Scottish GDP is estimated to be 6.1% lower by 2030 compared to continued EU membership. That equates to a cost for each person in Scotland about an equivalent of £1,600. So even with a deal, Brexit is going to be hugely damaging. A no deal outcome would be even worse. In a no deal outcome, tariffs and other barriers to trade would be a certainty, which would cripple Scottish export sectors such as red meat and seafood. The benefits of EU programmes such as Horizon and Erasmus would have enriched Scotland's education and academic life for years could be lost. And according to our modelling, a hard no deal Brexit could lead to a loss of up to 8.5% of GDP in Scotland by 2030. So as a responsible government, we are doing all that we can to mitigate the harm of Brexit, but it is simply not possible to mitigate all of these negative impacts. Perhaps even more worrying is what a no deal outcome would say about the UK government's vision of itself and of the world. A world where outdated notions of sovereignty are so important that they can justify any amount of economic and social damage. That is not a vision for the 21st century, and it's not Scotland's vision. The coronavirus pandemic has demonstrated the need for more international cooperation, not less. The Scottish Government's programme for government, published on the 1st of September, sets out how Scotland is committed to participating as a proactive international partner. It includes our future approach to European engagement following Brexit. Scotland shares the EU core values, and at a time when the UK Government is bringing forward legislation which it admits breaches an international treaty, the Scottish Government will continue to uphold these core values. We will also continue arguing for multilateral solutions and engagement, and we will keep our policies aligned with those of the EU where we can through our work on the Continuity Bill. This also means, of course, continuing to fight against the UK Internal Market Bill provisions, which would seriously undermine the devolution settlement. The sorry course of the Brexit negotiations has proved to us that it simply is not possible to work constructively with the UK Government. Some of you may have seen the reports from Guido Fawkes earlier this week. The Scottish Government is clear that Scotland and its people need the ability to decide on their own future, which should be, we believe, a European future. But in the short term, we have no choice but to focus on damage limitation. A no deal coinciding with COVID-19 would be catastrophic, and we must and we can do all that we can to avoid it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny, for that reminder that the government has had opportunities to limit the damage as a result of leaving the European Union, limit the damage to Scotland and the rest of the UK. And we should encourage the Scottish government and the opposition parties to continue to press the government on a form of Brexit which is less damaging. Next up, I'd like to introduce Shafak Mohammed. Shafak was first elected as a councillor in Sheffield in 2004. And since that time, he has been fighting for young people, helping those in the most deprived areas of the city into education and employment. Areas which will be badly affected by the combined effects of a no-deal Brexit and a second wave of COVID-19. More recently, Shafak was elected as a Liberal Democrat MEP for Yorkshire and Humber, serving up until the UK left the European Union in January. Shafak, over to you.
Thank you, Hania, and friends and colleagues from the European movement for organising tonight's rally and for providing me the opportunity to share my thoughts about why I'm backing your campaign, No to a No Deal campaign. What we want to do is stop a no-deal exit from the EU on the 31st of December. As I speak to you tonight from Sheffield, my home city, we are gripped by a second wave of COVID. We're on the top 8 cities in the UK for infection. Our current infection rate is 327 per 100,000 and rising. Coupled with this, we are expected increases in winter flu amongst our most vulnerable in our society, our pensioners, people with long-term illnesses and those with respiratory conditions. They're all facing a double whammy of COVID-19 and winter flu. This will also place a huge stress on our fragile NHS, an NHS actually that's staffed by almost 70,000 people from the EU, nearly making up about 6% of all the total workforce. But more importantly, 10% of our doctors are from the EU and 7% of our nurses. So while we are expecting these great people to put their lives at risk this winter, save the lives of our loved ones, what is our UK government doing? Well, it's using these fantastic workers from the EU as bargaining chips. Many of these fabulous workers do not even know, even at this late stage, about their residential status. This is so wrong, and we all need to unite and send a clear message tonight to the government that a no-deal Brexit in December will be totally devastating for these fabulous NHS workers. The second reason I'm so passionate to stop a no-deal Brexit is it impacts on our universities. Like you said earlier, I work with our young people, often from the most deprived backgrounds. And in my local area of Yorkshire, we have some really fantastic universities, including the University of York, the University of Leeds and the University of Sheffield that I attended, with whom all I had the pleasure of working alongside under the banner of the White Rose Consortium in Brussels during my time as MEP. Every year, thousands of students from the EU look forward to studying in the university in the UK, as currently their qualifications gained here will be also recognised in the other 27 EU member states. However, a no-deal Brexit will be a huge barrier to these students in attending our universities. And I recall, actually, just before we left, a very frank and I would say a very disturbing presentation from the BMA in the European Parliament about the huge drop-off that already had occurred of medical student applications to UK universities, due in part due to uncertainty of whether there will be a deal and whether qualifications gained in UK universities would be recognised in EU states, because if there's no deal, it puts all that at risk. And already we've seen the harm that this has caused. That, you know, just for Germany last year, 1,000 students that normally would have come to UK university decided to go to the other member states. And that's going to have a long-term effect on the doctors who will be in our NHS. And finally, a no-deal Brexit will impact on the import and export of medicines and radioactive isotopes for cancer diagnosis and treatment. And let's be honest, in the middle of a pandemic, it is no time to disrupt our medical supply chains. Actually, in fact, it's not just our medical supply chains, as Polly said earlier. A no-deal Brexit will also mean immediate tariffs on food, sending food prices up at a time when many families will be in financial difficulties as a result of job losses. And I can tell you the region I'm in and the city I'm in suffered hugely in the 1980s because of job losses. And I know firsthand what it means when my father was also made redundant, how we had to actually survive on school meals. So therefore, this winter, a lot of people will also be dependent on food imports in the EU. And it's really important that we all get together and actually campaign to stop a no deal Brexit. So friends and colleagues, time is running out. A no deal Brexit will cost lives and devastate our communities. So I call upon all of us to act today. Contact our local MPs. There's still time. Work with them to stop this disaster that our country will face if Boris Johnson and Dominic Cummings succeed in crashing our country out of the EU without a deal.
Thank you, Shafak. Thank you for looking out for our young people who are too often underrepresented in our politics, and of course, who didn't vote for Brexit in 2016. So thanks, Shafak. That was Shafak Mohammed, former Liberal Democrat MEP. And we agree completely that it is through activism that we can bring about change in this country and prevent the UK leaving the transition period at the end of this year without a deal. So please keep writing to your MPs. If you weren't able to virtually meet them today as part of our lobby day, then get in touch with them and ask to set up a virtual surgery meeting so that you can ask them to stand up against a no deal Brexit. We regularly hear from MPs who tell us that your lobbying can and does make a difference. So let them know why you say no to no deal.
I'm supporting the No to No Deal campaign to ensure smooth access to medical supplies.
The European Union has some of the most extensive environmental protection laws in the world, and membership of the EU ensured that the UK protected natural habitats, kept air and clean water, ensured proper waste disposal, and helps businesses move towards a sustainable economy. We don't yet know how Brexit will affect the UK's environmental policy, but it is a topic that our next speaker is very passionate about. Caroline Lucas has twice served as the leader of the Green Party of England and Wales, and she is currently MP for Brighton Pavilion. She's been a great supporter of our movement. So please join me in welcoming Caroline Lucas to the event this evening. Over to you, Caroline.
Thanks so much, Hanya. It's a real privilege to be here tonight. And thank you to everyone who's been lobbying their MPs. And I want to say how important I think that is, because we live in such dangerous times. You know, we always knew that the Vote Leave campaign was ruthless, yet perhaps we didn't imagine they would literally hijack the apparatus of government. We always knew we had a Prime Minister devoid of moral compass, but we didn't imagine he would literally close down Parliament when it posed an obstacle to his ambitions. We knew we had a cabinet full of sycophants, but perhaps even then we didn't imagine that they would tear up international law so brazenly, so recklessly, treating peace and stability in Northern Ireland as just another piece of collateral damage. So just because a no-deal Brexit would be a disaster of epic proportions, I don't think we should imagine for a moment that this government wouldn't allow it to happen. They've made perfectly clear that they would, and that is why our campaign is more urgent than ever. After all, this is a Prime Minister who just on Sunday claimed that if a no-deal Brexit took place at the same time as a renewed coronavirus wave this winter, then, and I quote, "we will prosper mightily." Now, it really is worth asking who the "we" is in that ridiculous statement, because it's not those who've already lost their jobs, who are desperate to find new work. It's not those who are struggling to make ends meet, for whom the prospect of higher food prices means yet more dependence on food banks. It's not those who depend on medicines from the EU, whose lives could be put at risk. You know, this is a government of such privilege and complacency. They simply don't care about the harm a no-deal Brexit would do. Boris Johnson actually said that a no-deal Brexit would be a good outcome. Yet leaked copies of his own government's dossier make clear that a reasonable worst-case scenario comprises food shortages, medicine shortages, petrol shortages, the army needed on the streets to keep order. According to Michael Gove, that good outcome also involves queues of over 7,000 lorries heading towards Dover and needing passports to enter Kent. That good outcome means we're about to become the only major economy on earth with no trade deal with any of our neighbours within a 2,000-mile radius. And yet, in the middle of a deadly pandemic, during the worst recession in 300 years, ours is a government that has refused to extend the transition, a government so driven by narrow ideology that it turns down an opportunity to protect people from a triple whammy of hardship, and deliberately, knowingly, brazenly makes this country poorer, less influential, and more vulnerable to shocks. I have a particular message to EU nationals living in Britain, our friends and our neighbours who deserve so much better than this. Your lives should never have been used as bargaining chips in this government's political games. And it's continuing right now, as you know, with EU citizens in the UK potentially being shut out of vital services because of ministers' refusal to issue physical proof of your right to live in the UK. And promises that you'll have the exact same rights simply are not enough. And having to rely on online records is hardly reassuring from a government who can't even get their online party conference working properly without technical collapse, and who, of course, lost 16,000 COVID electronic records earlier this week. We cannot allow a two-tier society to develop in the UK where British and non-EU citizens can prove their right to work and access healthcare at any time, anywhere, simply by showing a physical card or passport, and where EU citizens inexplicably cannot. And remember that, of course, Boris Johnson has no mandate for this vicious form of Brexit. 4 years ago, in what was the most mendacious, toxic and cynical political campaign this country has ever seen, no deal was never discussed. It wasn't on the ballot paper. As Michael Gove himself has said, no one voted to leave without a deal. So the situation we're facing right now represents an enormous failure of politics and diplomacy. The more so since support for Brexit is actually now collapsing, with polls finding a shrinking minority of people still back it. And no wonder. A no deal breakdown will spark anger and blame and enmity with our closest neighbours, stoking up still further by Brexiteer newspapers fanning Europhobic flames. And yet these are the neighbours who we need more than ever, as the rise of populism elsewhere in the world makes it a much more dangerous place. And certainly we need it if we're going to work together to tackle the even greater crisis that we face, the climate emergency. And as Hania just said, we don't know yet what the environment regulations will look like post-Brexit, but what we do know at the very least is that there is going to be a massive governance gap, because the Office of Environmental Protection is not going to be up and running in time to take over from the EU when we come to the 1st of January. And if the Internal Market Bill is anything to go by, then there is going to be no real commitment to upholding high social and environmental standards post-Brexit. And that is a cause of serious concern. So in conclusion, we must redouble our efforts against a no deal. And today is a really crucial reminder of just how many of us still stand united against that outcome. It's also a crucial moment to reflect on the damage that will be done by even a last-minute face-saving agreement. And no doubt, as Polly said, Johnson will try to present it as this incredible, fantastic, world-beating victory. So we mustn't let him get away with that either, especially as the brutal reality hits home on the 1st of January. Any of the painfully thin deals on offer will still mean extra costs and delays and queues and paperwork. And a deal now may eliminate tariffs and quotas, but it does nothing for services, and it still means disruption and division on a massive scale. Whatever happens, they will no doubt claim it as a victory, but we know better. No deal or a last-minute deal, either way, the status quo in this country remains intolerable for huge numbers of people. And that's why underpinning our campaign is a commitment to healing Britain, reinvigorating our democracy, restoring the value of truth, and renewing hope. And I want to end by saying a few words about hope, because it can seem in such short supply right now. Whatever happens, the movement to be as close as possible to the EU will not end. Whatever happens as a result of the negotiations over the next few months, a majority of people in this country want those closer relations, and we, all of us, will be campaigning to build them. Perhaps starting with the Erasmus programme, which has given our young people such opportunities in the past, which is why it is so unforgivable to have ripped that up as well. So let's hope that those who say it's darkest just before the dawn are right, because, my friends, it does look pretty dark right now. But our movement has always been about changing the course of history, and we will continue together to reach for the bigger and better future that we know is possible.
Thank you, Caroline, for being such a strong supporter of the campaign. And what particularly resonates from Caroline's speech there is the fact that there is no mandate for the kind of Brexit that the government is pursuing at the moment. and the government's vision of the good outcome doesn't align with the promises that were made in the 2016 Leave campaign. And that's something that we need to remember and to hold the government to. So moving on, less than 1 week ago, the European Commission announced the start of legal proceedings against the UK as a result of the Internal Market Bill, which would essentially give the government the power to ignore its own withdrawal agreement. This is just the latest example of how Boris Johnson is willing to turn the UK into a laughingstock and tarnish its reputation to push through his vision of a low-standard, high-barrier future. A solicitor by trade, our next speaker served as a Conservative MEP from 2004 until 2019. He has repeatedly implored his party not to continue this path of breaking international law to address internal party politics, and we're delighted to have him here with us this evening. Please join me in welcoming Sajjad Karim, former Conservative MEP for the North West of England.
Hania, thank you very much, and good evening, everybody. As Hania said, yes, I'm a Conservative, but I come in peace. And of course, Brexit means it, except it doesn't. Everybody takes the view now, certainly in my party, that we have delivered Brexit. Of course, the United Kingdom has left the European Union. And that Brexit means Brexit, except it doesn't, because Brexit is a step-by-step and by any means necessary project, which hasn't completed its full course. The delivery of the UK exit from the European Union is not, was not, the end point of this project. And the delivery of a no-deal Brexit certainly has elements of the protagonist's agenda. Very recently, the British public have been told that they can only, or we as a country can only clamp down on asylum seekers if we are free of our obligations under the European Court of Human Rights, free of our membership of the Council of Europe, and indeed freed of the chains of international law. Leaving with a deal potentially slows all of those arguments down. Now, if we do leave the Council of Europe, European Court of Human Rights, and absolve ourselves of the obligations of international law, we as a country are changed forever. And that is actually what the minds behind this entire project actually want to achieve. As a lawyer, I can tell you, I'm fundamentally ashamed of the fact that we required EU citizens who had exercised their legal right to come to the United Kingdom, we required them to re-regularize their already regular status. And it's only one further sign of the direction of travel. Now, the chaos of a no-deal Brexit, compounding to the crisis of Corona, is unsustainable economically. This is something the government knows. That is why they are not publishing their impact assessments. The chaos of a no deal at our borders and ports, in our financial markets, in our healthcare sectors, retail, it is all totally avoidable. Extra costs for customs and more bureaucracy, non-tariff barriers, all totally avoidable. Now, I'm a unionist. I didn't support Brexit, but it has happened. We have left the European Union. If we secure a deal and maintain the integrity of the United Kingdom, we have a chance. If we exit without a deal and the ongoing corona situation as it is, I fear we are putting our union in very real danger. In that sense, I don't hesitate to say that No Deal is an English nationalist, isolationist project. So very finally, I have this message for Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Get a deal. You promised you had one, deliver it. Avoid the chaos, say no to No Deal. Then let's build from the deal that you secure. Here at home, and a truly meaningful relationship with our European family once again. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Serge. And of course, we would welcome and encourage all Conservative MPs and MEPs, former, acting or former, to hold the government to its legal commitments and to its commitments to the people. Our next speaker would like to echo what you will hear throughout this event about the importance of contacting your MP and of getting involved in our movement. Lord Michael Heseltine was a member of the Conservative Party for over 65 years before having the whip removed last year, despite decades of loyalty, for speaking out against the government's course on Brexit. But despite that, he has remained steadfast in his conviction that EU membership has greatly benefited this country and that a no-deal Brexit should be firmly off the table. Lord Heseltine served as Deputy Prime Minister of the UK and is the current President of the European Movement. Sadly, he could not join us live tonight, but he's recorded this message for us.
The debate about Britain and Europe has been going on for years. Nobody could have foreseen that the critical moments when we have to reach an agreement or live under a no-deal scenario have been completely clouded out by the disaster of COVID. I personally have rather sympathetic views about the government, simply because it's so easy to criticize, particularly from one's home where one is locked down. I've got no scientific knowledge. I don't know anything about disease control. And it's quite obvious that we're dealing with wholly unpredictable circumstances. So I give the government the benefit of the doubt. But the truth of the matter is that underlying the COVID dominance of the headlines is Brexit. And if there's one upside of COVID, it is that it's a short-term problem waiting for the vaccine. Brexit is not a short-term problem. It is about the future direction of our economy. And of course, let's turn it into real terms about our standard of living, about our jobs, about the prospects for younger generations. That's the personal side. The national side, of course, is where you think this country should be on the world stage. Indeed, do you think we should be a united country? Or should we follow the logic of Brexit and break up the United Kingdom? Why don't we go back and fight the Wars of the Roses? You know, all that history told us that step by step we have advanced to the stage where we reconcile the bitterness of tribalism and nationalism in a much more rational way. So Brexit is the issue of our generation. And personally, and I know most of you have got clear views, that this is something we would avoid in any political way we could achieve. It is a disaster for this country. But if you can turn a disaster into a double disaster, the way to do it is to have no deal, because that won't simply inject massive uncertainty, unanswered questions, unanswerable questions into the body politic and into the business world. People simply will not know what is going to happen or how to conduct their business affairs. But something else will happen. There will be recriminations, bitter, deep, hateful comments will be made. Some people, of course, will say it's a triumph. We're free, we're sovereign, we can do what we like. They won't actually tell you much about what they are going to do because they won't know. And above all else, they won't know what other countries will do by way of reaction. So if Brexit is bad, no deal is disaster. And of course, as I talk to you, I know what you may be thinking. What can I do about it? And I, goodness knows, I feel that very strongly. But I think it's very important to realize that we are part of the great democratic configuration of people's views. We have voices, we have influence, we have friends, we have people we know. And so my strongest advice to you is don't give in, don't give up. Use whatever peaceful, legitimate political vehicles are available to you. Certainly tell your MP that it is his duty to our country to try and secure a rational stepping stone into the new post-Brexit world. And that means, by all accounts, avoiding no deal.
Thank you, Lord Heseltine. Often overlooked is the effect that a no-deal Brexit would have on ordinary people across the UK, which brings us back to the devolved nations. The people of Scotland and Northern Ireland voted to remain in the European Union in 2016, and it's important to ensure that the interests of people from across the UK are not overlooked. We're pleased to welcome a speaker that many of you will remember from our event in June. And he's back with us tonight, Stephen Farry, MP for North Down and the Deputy Leader of the Alliance Party of Northern Ireland.
Hello, I remain a passionate European. For the UK as a whole, and for Northern Ireland in particular, EU membership is fundamentally in our interest. We should be clear on the ambition to rejoin the EU in the future, and to strive for the closest working relations until that point. I regret, but I'm not surprised, that the future relationship negotiations have become so problematic. While the risk of a no-deal situation remains very possible, it is more likely that some form of superficial deal will be reached. Yet, with less than 90 days to go, preparations cannot be comprehensive nor ready in time. Considerable disruption and chaos seem inevitable, with the wider economic and social implications. But even a superficial deal requires the UK to retreat on its extraordinary and outrageous threat to break international law relating to the withdrawal agreement and its Northern Ireland Protocol. Brexit poses unique challenges to my region. We are a divided society and a contested space. Once the decision was taken for the whole of the UK to leave both the customs union and the single market, some form of special arrangements for Northern Ireland were inevitable in order to protect the Good Friday Agreement. However, Brexit entails some form of interface with the EU. The government's breach of international law over the protocol suggests that it has not yet come to terms with the implications of its choices and its red lines on Brexit. The majority of people in Northern Ireland did not support Brexit, but were prepared to be pragmatic around the backstop, and the same with protocol today. Most people and businesses do not want the UK government breaking international law, period, and certainly not on their behalf. The government's claims to be doing so to protect the Good Friday Agreement are risible and represent a significant and deliberate distortion of what that agreement represents. The objective must be to keep open borders throughout our islands as far as possible. Any border across the island of Ireland or down the Irish Sea does bring emotional and political implications. The protocol is designed to encompass the bare minimum to avoid a border on the island. Any reneging on the terms of the protocol could see that customs frontier pushed back onto the island with the pressure for checks as the EU naturally seeks to protect its economic integrity. The protocol pushes the pressure to the Irish Sea interface. It is naive to think that friction can be avoided entirely, but friction has to be managed in the least disruptive way possible. This entails accepting the imperfect protocol, but working within the Joint Committee to seek as much flexibility and mitigations as possible. But that requires trust and good faith. Threatening to breach the withdrawal agreement is self-defeating, both in those narrow terms, but also to the UK's ambitions to have a future relationship with the EU and a trade deal with the United States and others. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. And of course, the government must not be allowed to get away with their no deal trajectory. The impacts on Northern Ireland must be considered. And we travel now from Northern Ireland to the Garden of England. There has been a lot of discussion in the news recently about the impacts of a no deal Brexit on Kent. For example, the government recently started construction on a huge new lorry park just outside Ashford that will accommodate thousands of lorries waiting for their turn at the Port of Dover and the Channel Tunnel. The construction of this lorry park was started in haste due to the government's lack of no deal preparation, meaning that the local Conservative MP, Damien Green, didn't even know that the plans were taking place until he read them in the news. To tell you a bit more about what's going on in Kent, we're going to hand over to Gavin Esler. Gavin will be known to many of you as an author and a former BBC presenter, but he is also the Chancellor of the University of Kent, and we're very pleased to welcome him here this evening.
Hello, I wondered how the oven-ready Brexit deal looks where you are. From where I sit, it looks like a dog's dinner. Some of you will remember that a little while ago I published a book called Brexit Without the Bullshit. And while I was touring trying to talk about the facts about Brexit, I came across quite a few rather angry Brexiters. And that always puzzled me because why are they so angry? They have got their heart's desire, apparently. We're just about to enter the sunlit uplands. And at one event in London, a lady challenged me and she said, "This is the Brexit I voted for." I said, "Well, what did you vote for in 2016? And she said, "I voted to leave the European Union without a deal on October the 31st, 2019. Now, of course, that could not have been true. No date was set. We never discussed having a no-deal Brexit. No one talked about it. No one said there could be queues of up to 7,000 lorries in Kent. No one said lorry drivers would need a permit to enter Kent. No one said there would be a customs border in the Irish Sea. In fact, Mrs. Thatcher said Northern Ireland was as British as Finchley. Well, there's no customs border around Finchley, but there is going to be one apparently in the Irish Sea. But plenty of us did say that even the mildest form of Brexit would damage the British economy. Plenty of us did say that Goldman Sachs and other massive investment firms would leave. And plenty of us did say that the car industry, farming, food standards, and many of the things we hold dear in Britain would suffer. And all of these things are happening. Project Fear is now Project Here. It's right now and it's with us. So we are saying that no deal, which no one ever voted for, no one was ever consulted about, is absolutely not acceptable. And in the midst of our COVID crisis, a no-deal Brexit will heap misery upon misery. It will be an act of profound self-harm. In all of this, the people who voted for Brexit, the reason they're angry is they will get their heart's desire and it won't make them happy. And the utterly duplicitous politicians who promised us the moon have delivered a pile of manure. We face the worst economic crisis of our lifetimes, the worst public health crisis for 100 years or so, and the team led by Boris Johnson seem to think they can slip a disastrous No Deal Brexit into the mix and break international obligations, and we won't notice. Well, here is the news. We have noticed. Events have consequences, and when we end up with a bad Brexit deal, or no deal, or a pointless Brexit, we will remember them. We will remember the people who brought us this self-harm. And remember one other thing. Brexit is not done. Thank you.
I'm supporting the No Deal campaign as the basis for a good future relationship with Europe.
Okay, and we turn to Westminster for our final few speakers. Next up is somebody who describes herself as a lifelong socialist and who has been a strong opponent of No Deal Brexit. Since being elected to the Parliament last year, will you please welcome to your screen the Labour MP for Streatham, Belle Ribeiro-Addy.
Hi, my name is Belle Ribeiro-Addy and I'm the Labour Member of Parliament for Streatham, where 79% of us voted to remain. From the outset, it's been clear that Brexit was a project designed to push the UK to the right and whip up division. Just a couple of weeks ago, the Conservatives voted through their disastrous internal market bill, which, as they themselves acknowledged, breaches international law. Any reasonable person would think that the bill that has literally been declared illegal wouldn't make it anywhere near Parliament, let alone voted through, but not a single Conservative MP opposed it. This is just further confirmation, if you even needed it, that we're lurching towards a disastrous no-deal Brexit. Overriding the withdrawal agreement like this just undermines what little integrity this government has left after months of double-dealing and brinkmanship in its trade negotiations with the EU. The latest developments today, with Boris threatening to walk away yet again, are fooling nobody. But quite apart from backing out of our international obligation, passing a bill that opens the door for the government to break international law raises a serious question. How can other countries trust us if we're willing to break international law when it suits us? At a time of economic recession, mass redundancy and public health crisis, this is an incredibly self-destructive thing to do. It will leave my constituents in Streatham and people across the UK much worse off. With food prices already creeping higher and the government refusing point blank to extend the transition period, a worst case scenario no-deal Brexit could see shortages of food, medicine and fuel, as well as increased costs for everyday goods. A government that actually cared wouldn't risk this during an ongoing pandemic, a jobs crisis and the worst recession in history. You don't dig yourself out of a hole by digging even deeper. Just today, I spoke to constituents who had deep concerns about the likely impact a no-deal Brexit would have on them. They expressed fears about pharmaceutical shortages, European travel, the citizenship status of EU citizens, and also just the staggering financial cost of actually leaving, which the government is often burying in pandemic spending. In trade, in international relations, in domestic policy making, the government's handling of Brexit is just further evidence that they think it's one rule for them and another rule for everybody else. I'm opposing a no-deal Brexit and encourage all of you to do the same. So write to your MPs and tell them to take a stand against this and say no to a no-deal Brexit.
I'm Louise and I'm supporting the No Deal campaign because I'm from the northeast and we're set to be the worst affected economically up here by a no deal Brexit, especially with Nissan closing.
Our next speaker is a member of the Shadow Cabinet who has been a prominent and passionate voice within our movement as a patron of the Labour Movement for Europe. Unfortunately, he couldn't be with us live, but we hope that you'll enjoy this video from Ian Murray. Labour MP for Edinburgh South and Shadow Secretary of State for Scotland.
I think it's really important for us to keep the pressure on the government in terms of their drive towards a no deal, because of the significant damage that would do to every single corner of the United Kingdom. Some regions, of course, worse than others, and the irreparable damage it would do to our big industries like chemicals, like aerospace, like car manufacturing, Scotch whisky, and many, many others indeed. And of course, we know that the Prime Minister has been flying by the seat of his pants in terms of Brexit for the last 6 months, and particularly in the run-up to the election back in December last year, when he promised the British people an oven-ready deal, was the term that he used, when we knew that he didn't have an oven-ready deal, and we knew he didn't even have the oven, let alone the deal to put in that oven. It was a blatant lie to the British people, and that now those chickens are now coming home to roost, because when you have someone like Boris Johnson in Downing Street who can't get to the end of a sentence without a lie in the middle, and without a misconception in the middle, and without trying to deceive the public, it was always going to be the case that we'd end up in the situation that we were in. And don't forget, remember the Conservative backbench MP and the very much the Brexiteer John Barron let the cat out of the bag when the withdrawal agreement was going through the House of Commons. It was rushed through, don't forget, a week after the general election on the 19th of December, before Parliament broke up for the Christmas recess, and he let the cat out of the bag when he said that it paved the way for a no deal, and he only really stated the obvious, but it was important that that came from the mouth of a Brexiteer. And now, as we sit here in October 2020, with the 31st of December transition period ending, we are now in a position where no deal is probably now the most likely scenario. Now, all of the negotiations seem to be going on, but there's this horse trading in terms of fishing, in terms of other industries, and in terms of that frictionless trade. And I think the EU here deserve a great deal of credit, because they've been consistent all along. They've always said that they are a legal construct, that you can't cherry-pick the best bits out of the European Union legal treaties and take those forward. You have to come to a trading arrangement with the EU based on their legal rules. And if you're unwilling to meet those legal rules with the single market and the customs union, as we know, then you have to leave them both, which leaves you in a much worse position as being a member of the European Union. And that's the big fight now that we are currently having in Parliament, and it's the big fight the country will have to have in the run-up to the 31st of December. And this is really important, because if you look at the consequences a no deal would have, or even a bad deal would have, on our economy, layer on top of that the problems that we're going to have in the worldwide economy with COVID and what the post-COVID recovery has to look like, the last thing we need is all that uncertainty, all that economic downturn, all the jobs that will be lost, all the growth that will be lost by going down the route of a no deal. And of course, on top of all of that, you have the unedifying stuff of the last 6 weeks or so with the Internal Market Bill, where the Prime Minister's openly admitted, and the Northern Ireland Secretary admitted in the House of Commons at the dispatch box, that the UK government were looking to break international law and break their treaty obligations. And that's really important for a number of reasons. One is it undermines our negotiations with the European Union in terms of taking it too far on the way in which we'd be willing to act. That doesn't seem like fair play. Secondly, because the Prime Minister championed this deal, negotiated this deal, brought it to the House of Commons, voted for it, got it through the parliamentary processes, got it onto the international agenda, and used that as the basis for his general election victory. And now he's decided to roll back on that, to say that it wasn't the deal that he had promised it would be, and the piece of legislation that he promised it would deliver for the negotiations in terms of getting a deal. And thirdly, why would anybody trust the UK again in any international treaty? It undermines the Northern Ireland Protocol, it undermines the peace agreement in Northern Ireland, and of course Nancy Pelosi and many in America have said that they won't deal with the UK, and they'll be encouraging the US administration not to deal with the UK in terms of a trade deal if there is any way that undermines peace in Northern Ireland, a peace that everyone worked so hard to achieve, none more so than the Americans' assistance in terms of getting it there. And fourthly, the Internal Market Bill fundamentally undermines who we are as a country. We've always played fair. We've written the international legal rules. We've written most of the treaty rules in terms of the development of the European Union over the last 40 years or so. And to turn our back on all of that in terms of our legal system, in terms of our trust. It really is the last straw in terms of the Prime Minister's gameplay. And I think ultimately what all of this means is we have a Prime Minister who is not capable of doing the job. We have a government that's out of control. We have, as we have always known, a Brexit process and a Brexit referendum that brought Brexit around to where we are today, based on lies, based on propositions that couldn't be delivered, and all those chickens are now coming home to roost. So we have to continue to make the case, even through this global pandemic, even through all of the oxygen in politics and in the media and in the country being taken up by COVID issues and by post-COVID recovery. We still have to, as a European movement, for the politicians and the people who care passionately about the European Union, to continue to make the case that what we have to do is ensure that we take no deal off the table and get that promised good deal that the government delivered. Now, I would wish we were still going to be a member of the European Union. I wish we could still argue at this stage to be a member of the European Union. I'm afraid that, unfortunately, that argument was lost due to the general election being called. For some of our colleagues that called that, they should never have done so. But that is all now water under the bridge. We have left as a member. The transition period runs out the 31st of December, and we have to do everything we possibly can to make the case through pressure from politicians and the public, crucially, through the European movement and the Labour movement for Europe, which I'm a proud patron of, and I hope Labour members and supporters join that and help us in that fight and join the European movement and help us in that fight, because we have to get no deal well and truly off the table. We have to expose Boris Johnson and his colleagues, Michael Gove and others, Nigel Farage and others, for the lies and deception that they gave the British people in terms of not just the election in December, but all the way for the last 3.5 years about what could be delivered. And we have to demand that the UK government puts in place and gets that deal that's of benefit, or at least the least worst scenario of leaving the European Union. Thank you very much for all that you're doing. Thank you to my colleagues for being on this rally today. Keep making the arguments, keep taking the fight, and keep supporting our position and place in Europe. Thank you very much for all that you do. Thank you for being part of this rally. And let's hope that come the 31st of December, all those horrible chlorinated chickens that are coming home to roost at the door of Downing Street are merely propositions, and that we get that deal that means we can go into a post-COVID recovery and a post-Brexit Britain with at least some sense of pride, some sense of frictionless trade, and some sense that the government know what they're doing. Maybe I'm an optimist. I can't see it happening, but we'll continue to fight. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Ian, for being such a strong supporter of the European movement and the No to No Deal campaign. Regardless of which party you support, it is important to have conversations in your local community. It is in local communities across the UK where hearts and minds can be changed and where our activism makes the most difference. That's why European Movement continues to champion our local groups across the UK. While our campaigning may have moved online due to COVID-19, our local groups have not been deterred, and they continue to virtually engage with residents in villages, towns and cities across the UK. To talk a bit more about that and about how you can make a difference in your local community, I would like to hand over to our final speaker. Anna Bird is the new CEO of the European Movement UK. She joined us last month from Scope, where as an executive director, she transformed the charity's influence and reputation in Westminster and secured important wins for disabled people's employment. She was previously a senior leader at the Fawcett Society, championing women's equality, and at Mind, the mental health charity. Thank you for joining us, Anna.
Thanks, Hanya. It is such an honour to be the European Movement's new chief executive. And on behalf of the European Movement, I want to thank everyone here on this line tonight for giving up your time tonight and for standing with us to say no to No Deal. It has been amazing over the course of today to see the brilliant and creative ways you have all got involved in our action day. We've had dogs, we've had woof to No Deal, we've had drones flying across York, we've had socially distanced demos, We've had Boris lookalike on tour in Nottingham. We've had banners hung over the motorway in Enfield. We've had hundreds of people taking selfies with placards and posters, and all of you are saying no to No Deal. And the numbers have been really impressive. We have thousands of people online tonight. We're almost so close. We're almost at 100,000 people signing our petition against No Deal. Please help us get over the line. It would be such a brilliant thing if we could get us to 100,000 people tonight signing that petition. Best of all, as Hanya said earlier, we have had over 4,000 of you signing up to contact your MP. And across the course of today, campaigners across Scotland and England and Wales have been having conversations with their MPs across all the parties. And thanks to all your efforts today, we will get our message noticed. And now you're here and you're probably wondering what we want you to do next. And so I've been asked to just say a few things about what you can do. And there are 3 things you can do beyond tonight to keep this campaign alive. If you haven't already, please do write to your MP. Ask them what they are doing to prevent a no deal Brexit. Ask them what assessment they have made of the impact of a no deal Brexit in your constituency. There's a tool on our website. It's super easy to write to your MP, and we need to get to everyone in Parliament to get our message out there. Secondly, find and join your local European movement group. Again, there's a map on the website. It's easy to find your local group. And across the country, those European movement branches are doing the work to continue the campaign beyond today. So get involved and make sure your voice is heard in that campaign. And lastly, if you can, and I appreciate that for many people right now it is really difficult, but if you can, please do chip into our crowdfunder. We need your support to keep up the pressure, and we need to keep running more events like this if we're to keep the pressure up and to say no to No Deal. Finally, if you like what you've seen today, and if you believe in the UK keeping the closest possible ties to Europe after Brexit, then please join the European movement. You can find out how to join on our website, and by joining you will be part of a growing movement of passionate pro-Europeans across the UK. We're a cross-party campaign, and we're here to campaign for a close relationship with the European Union after Brexit. Before I go, I just want to say a quick thank you to Hanya for her skillful hosting of tonight. She's been fantastic, and she's absolutely fantastic, dedicated campaigner in the Leicester local group and nationally helping us with our campaigning too. And I also want to say a huge thank you to Scott and the rest of the team here at HQ. You've done a great job to organise this event virtually. It's not easy in these times to do this kind of thing, but it's been a great event. So thank you to everyone for that. Keep safe, everyone, and please keep saying no to No Deal.
Thank you to you, Anna, and to everybody working backstage there. There are thousands of people watching this rally live, and together we can make a difference. The transition period finishes in exactly 12 weeks' time, so we need to throw everything we've got at this. Please write to your MP, join your local group, contact your local newspapers, speak to your friends and families, and reshare our posts on social media. We've stopped No Deal before, and we can do it again. Thank you and good night.
It is quite right and wholly understandable that COVID dominates the news agenda. But ticking away beneath this economically dangerous COVID threat is Brexit. The interesting thing that in the last few days, people have started talking about a no Christmas COVID threat. The same timescale applies to Brexit. It's literally just round the corner. And the government in the course of the last few days seems to be almost opting for a no deal outcome with all the chaos, all the unpredictable damages that that could cause.
That's why people like me are coming together to say no to No Deal.
Last year, we stopped Boris Johnson from implementing a no deal Brexit. We can do it again.
But this is our last chance. We have to throw everything we've got at this.
We will be rallying together, writing to and sitting down with our MPs.
We will be doing everything to show that this government has no mandate for a no deal Brexit.
But we will only defeat our well-funded opponents if we all come together and contribute what we can to stop a no deal.
So please give what you can, stand with us and say no to No Deal.
This does break international law in a very specific and limited way.